of all, I want to thank Jonathan for putting this together. Sure it's going to make that a little bit more interesting than just listening to talk on it. It's great. Thank you, Jonathan. I want to start with just coming to a couple assumptions. Number one, I think we can all agree that war is hell. It doesn't matter if you're Syrian, Iraqi, from China, from the United States. It's not something that we really want to happen. Unfortunately, it does. Another assumption is that whatever I say today, especially if it's an opinion, I have the right to change my mind. I'm not quite sure what's coming out today, so I have an opinion and it's a little bit different. I have the right to change my mind. And I may do that this afternoon too. But when I change my mind, I'd like to call that growth. I'm growing. And the third thing that is so important to me is that, and this premise, whenever I do talk about this, and I don't necessarily talk about my military stint too often, but I don't have any reason to, because it's just part of my life that happened back a long time ago, and it's not something I think about that much. But the other thing that I always want people to understand when I talk about this is I came home healthy. Both physically and mentally. And that's important. How do you become a veteran? Well, most of us in here, I think, are probably old enough to be involved with the draft. Some of us are not. But the draft was part of the lives of many of us growing up. The draft was used in 5 wars: the Civil War, World War I, II, Korean, and Vietnam Wars. The Civil War, of course, they called it conscription, and you could buy your way out of it. If you paid enough, you get somebody else to take your place. That didn't last very long. I mean, it lasted through the Civil War, and then the draft did not really again begin until the First World War, when they wanted to have a million people volunteer for the First World War, and they only got about 70,000 to volunteer. So consequently, the draft started. They started the draft again back for the World War I. After World War I stopped, it was over. Again, it stopped, the draft, and it didn't start again until President Roosevelt in 1940, and he actually started before Pearl Harbor. I guess he should have saw what was coming. So the draft was started restarted again for World War II. Again, I think it was like ages 20 to 35, and then it was for 1 year, and then it was for 18 months, and then it was 20 to 45, or 45, and then it was 19 to 65, and so the draft continued then. Again, it kind of stopped after World War II. It started again for the Korean War, and kind of continued then to the Vietnam War. So for those of us who lived in the 50s, and even into the 60s, obviously, the draft was a big part of our lives. It was always hanging over us. Then, of course, when President Nixon came in, he went to a lottery for the draft, which made it easier. One of the reasons he went to the lottery, well, I don't know why he won't, but one of the possible positive things maybe is that you weren't always in suspension. It was more clear that you knew when you were going to go. Before that, you didn't know when you were going to be called, and you could be responsible until the age of 26. Went back to 26. So that's why I said it was always kind of hanging over you at the time, through those periods of time. So the lottery made it a little bit more clear. People knew who was going and who wasn't going, or well, you didn't know who went where, but at least you knew where you stood. Of course, I guess actually President Ford, I believe, actually stopped the draft, and then it started, and that was when the draft stopped. A period of time, and I think Barry was in this period of time, where there was no registration or anything. President Carter again started where all males 18 years old had to register for the draft. So there was a short period of time where those people, I think varies, and maybe I'm not sure, where you did not have to register for the draft. But when President Carter, and I guess it's called the Lebanon crisis, I guess maybe, I don't know what the deal was, but anyway, he started the all male must register, and it's registered. And as far as I know, at age 18, as far as I know, that still is continuing. I don't know if the young men now do register, and of course it's always men at this point. I'm not sure if they still do register or not. But, so that's part of where we are. Now, I'd like to have some of you guys help me out here. Some of you people, who was in the military? Quite a few people who were in the military at that time. Well, I'll tell you a little bit where I was. I got drafted in September of 1965. Went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Fort Mount, Kentucky, Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and then I had the privilege of taking a boat trip to a foreign country. So that's a little bit where. So if some of you who were here don't mind telling us a little bit of the timing, it's just a little bit of maybe where you were. I became a veteran because of the draft. I was drafted. Now, I have some numbers here, and I don't know how accurate they are. I have some numbers to give you later. I read 2 different books that gave me different numbers, so don't hold me to these numbers. But about 25% of the people who served, the men who served, and women who served in Vietnam were drafted. I thought that number might be higher, but it said 25%. And I think that number would be higher except for the fact that because people knew they would be drafted, so they enlisted. Under the theory that you could choose which military service you wanted to go to. And lost my train of thought real quick. And you could also choose what you wanted to be. Well, that kind of,
yeah.
you know, I had 3 choices here and 3 choices here, and I don't think I had any of them. Well, I know I didn't get any. So
the National Guard was also an option because I know a lot of guys that did that in lieu of being drafted because they had low lottery numbers.
yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, just a few minutes later, of what were your options at this point in time. Let's do it now. We'll get back to the people here. What were your options? What were options at that point, other than going?
You come home and get a letter, dear Ray.
Yes.
See you in 2 weeks.
Yep. That's exactly right.
My brother went to college as a pre-med major to help keep him out.
That's right.
But they stopped that after a while.
Well, the college deferment at one point was you could wait till after college was over.
Yeah.
And then later on, and I don't quite remember when this happened, but later on it was you could finish the semester you were in, and if you were a senior, you could finish your senior year. But that was one option to delay your.
I was a senior at Catawba College, and my number came up, and they were going to draft me midway through my 2nd semester of my senior year. I wouldn't have been able to graduate, and I took a draft exemption test and passed it that they offered. And then I was called, and I went in October of '52. It's interesting, I had been hired to be a teacher in our town school district, and my brother came down where I was working, and he said, "Bill, here's 2 letters. One was an acceptance of the job in Norristown, and the other was greetings. Friends and neighbors." So there went the teaching job. I left. I went in October 14th of '52.
And you went, where did you serve?
I went to. I served to Germany. I served in Germany at. Well, I went over in September of '53, and came home in September of '54.
I enlisted because I didn't have any money to go to college, and I enlisted in the Air Force, and I became a veteran because I served 3 years, 11 months, and 15 days in a year.
Who's counting?
But
Wartime.
no, I was in peacetime. I like to tell people that I was a peacetime warrior. I didn't do anything significant, but I spent my first month in Texas, Lackland Air Force Base, and then spent 10 months in Biloxi. And some of you are familiar with Biloxi, you've been there. And then I spent 3 years in Germany on a hilltop about 30 miles east of Heidelberg.
Okay, so Bill was drafted, he enlisted. Karen?
We had a next door neighbor who was a physician, he was a doctor. This was in New Jersey, and 3 small children. He knew he was about to be drafted probably for NOM, and he enrolled in some kind of community service, something or other, and he ended up being a doctor in New Mexico to like an underserved community.
That wasn't
Yeah, that was, I don't know exactly what
But
it was called.
well,
He was not in uniform, he did not, it wasn't military service, it was like alternative service of some kind that to keep him out of the draft, basically.
but the Surgeon General usually wears a uniform. There is a uniformed
Yes, I'm-
medical service.
Yeah, I got my draft notice, and after I got the draft notice, I already had 2 brothers in the Corps. So I went and volunteered, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps for 4 years. Because I knew I was going to Vietnam once I got my draft notice. So if I was going to Vietnam, I wanted the best training out there. So I joined the Corps.
Bob?
First of all, do I get a gig for being late? If you remember, Dave,
Just drop down. Give me 20.
all I want to see is, and whatever. Anyway, when I was called, the Marine Corps must have been short because every 5th person, we were standing in a line, every 5th person went into the Marines, whether they wanted to or not. No offense.
All right, Bob, it's all right. Anybody's going to share?
I went in and took my basic training in Camp Pickett, Virginia, and I went down to Fort Sam Houston, Texas for medical training. And then I went to Japan, up in the northern island of Hokkaido during the winter, and we were in Quonset huts. That was a lot of fun. The snow was deep, et cetera, et cetera.
What time of, when, about, was it mid-50s?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then from there I went down north of Tokyo, and one day trucks pulled out in front of our camp, and we were told to get in the trucks, and we went to a Marine base south of Tokyo, took amphibious training, ended up getting on a boat, a ship, with 3 landing craft inside. Yeah, and we went and we landed on the island of Iwo Jima. We had maneuvers there, and thank goodness I got a couple hours off. I asked for it and I got it, and I walked down the beach of Iwo Jima, thinking of all the Marines that didn't make it, and I climbed up Mount Suribachi where they had that famous picture with the raising the flag. And when I got up there, I found out there's a road on the other side going up, which I didn't know. I wasn't on that side of the island. But it was an adventure, walking down that beach on Iwo Jima. And all I heard, it was a beautiful day, all I heard was the waves lapping up in the shore, and it was something to think about.
Anybody else want to share? Carol has a story she's going to tell us about some of the other options other than being drafted and then enlisting would be the reserves, National Guard. I'm not quite sure if the reserves, National Guard, but there's story there. Canada was big, of course, in Vietnam. Married and children, there was some exemptions there. My memory bank, a lot of guys went to college, got married, had kids, and then got divorced. That's my view at it. Medical, there are medical deferments. There are also certain professions. We talked about college. And there was also conscientious objectors, which again, for a lot of the peace churches, became conscientious objectors.
I thought the Peace Corps was an option also.
Is also one of the options.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's one other option. Carol, she told me this story and I asked you to tell me.
Some of you have heard this before, but I have an older brother, and of course he was Vietnam War era, and he was working for NASA, and so he had a deferment for his job, and of course they would renew the deferment, and then he felt very strongly that the peacetime, he considered the Vietnam War not to be war, I guess, that the peacetime draft was unconstitutional. And he felt that a lot of the young men who were being sent overseas to Vietnam didn't know what they were going to get into and would not have volunteered and so on if they had known. So his response was to give up his deferment. And of course, as soon as he did that, our local draft board assumed that he was ready to be drafted. So they sent him a notice, and my brother's response was not to show up. So of course he was arrested and had to get bail to get out of jail. And then eventually there was a court case, and he tried very hard to present his case. The judge did not allow that. The judge says, "Were you drafted?" And my brother said yes. He said, "Did you show up?" My brother said no. End of the case. So my brother was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he served in Allenwood, which is a minimum security prison in Pennsylvania. He was there for about little over 3 years, and then he was released on parole. And he even appealed this before he was actually put in jail. He went through a lengthy appeal process, and he even appealed it all the way up to the Supreme Court in Washington, although they did not choose to review it. They did not accept it. But I have a copy of the brief. It's about that thick that they submitted, So he gave up a lot of his time, and he also sacrificed a lot of money to go through this lengthy court proceedings. And I think in his mind, he was vindicated whenever the peacetime draft was stopped. I think he felt that his efforts really helped that along, And I always admired him for standing up for his beliefs. That's my story.
Of course, Muhammad Ali is the most famous for going to jail. Another interesting part of Carol's story, which he didn't tell us, is that after he got out of jail and was applying for jobs, he had a gap in his resume. So people would ask him, "Well, what about this gap?" And he just said, "Well, the government sent me to Pennsylvania." So I thought that was interesting. Well, I want to read a couple vignettes here about. I read some books over the last couple of weeks. I didn't want to read books about politics and all the garbage, and go to libraries, 3 shelves of books about this. Most of them are about the Battle of Pleiku and Way and all that sort of stuff, and the politics. And I don't want to read those, so I picked out some books which I thought people were telling me stories of what they were. One of the books I read was called Voices from Vietnam by Barry Denenberg. This is a whole book of people talking about the war, from presidents to Secretary of State, Secretary of War, and individual people. I just want to read a couple of these, of how a couple people got to in the military, into the service. The first one is by William Earhart. He said, "I had been accepted at several colleges by my senior year, and then I just decided, no, I'm going to join the Marines. And I had to spend a lot of time talking to my parents about it, because at 17, of course, I would not have been allowed to sign an enlistment contract. They had to sign it. And I think what really tipped the scale of the discussion at one point was, I said, 'Mom, is this the way you raised me, to let other mothers' sons fight American wars?' And they were raised during World War II, so they finally let them go. And this one I find fascinating a little bit.
Earhart's father was pastor of St. Stephen's.
Is this the same year?
And,
Yeah.
yeah, and I met this young fellow when he was in Penn Ridge High School.
This one's by Donald Hines. He says, when I quit high school, I went down to the Army recruiter and just walked in and said, I want to join the Army. He said, sure, fine. Just take these tests and we'll talk to you. I took all the tests, and he called me into his office and said, look, you scored the highest in the automotive section of the test. I said, I expected to score the lowest there. I've never even saw the inside of a car. I guessed at everything on that test. He said, all right. Second highest score was clerical. I said, I don't want clerical. He ran down the field, and I kept saying, no, I don't like that. So he said, well, what do you want? I want to become an infantryman, and I want to go to Vietnam. You want to go to Vietnam? Yeah. He said, you got it. All right, a few statistics. And again, as I said before, statistics are kind of whatever they are. I have one here which really doesn't make any... I just found this fascinating. I'll throw it out. It doesn't have anything to do with continuing the story. But right now, nearly 4% of our military are not citizens. That's shocking. About 4% of our military now are not citizens.
Is it a path?
It's a path to
Has
citizenship.
been, not always, is it?
Well, our present administration wants to eliminate that path, and they want to reduce that to 3% by a certain period of time and keep going down. So that was a path to citizenship was being launched. 4%. I just thought that was fascinating. Anyway, I have read anywhere from between 2.5, 2.1 million people served in Vietnam, and anywhere from 700 to 1 million got injured. And about, oh, okay. No. 700 to about 1 million were in combat. And about a little over 300,000 were injured, about half of them seriously. And, the other thing too is about the average age of the person in Vietnam was about 7 years younger than the average age of their fathers in World War II. Which I can think, as you can see, is we needed more people in World War II. They kept going up the list as far as the age group, so I think that kind of makes sense. About 58,000 died, and of those 58,000, about 20% died of other things other than being killed. I don't know quite what those other things are for those 10,000 people, but that's roughly statistics. And just in comparison, and again, not to kill this, but I went to a seminar recently, and I thought I heard them say that 2,500 people died at Valley Forge, the Revolutionary War. 2,500 as opposed to the 50. And the other one is it's a little more current, and I just heard this recently, that they expect 70,000 people to die of opioids this year. About 200 people a day are dying of overdoses. I put that in perspective. Not that it's related, obviously, but it shows a little bit where we're going. Another book I read was called The Father of All Things, A Marine and His Son and the Legacy of Vietnam by Tom Bissell. This was interesting, I guess, because Tom was a writer, and he was asked to do a story, went to the story, said, how about if I do about Vietnam? And the guy said, well, take your father along, because he was there to get the story. Of course, Tom also wanted to get closer to his father and understand a little bit who his father was. He never really knew. He had a brother, and of course the other was his other brother, I think, was the favorite son. And Bissell, his father said he always called him a communist. So apparently he had long hair, I guess, I don't know. But anyway, they went to Vietnam. And the whole, I don't know exactly how this sets up, but there's two things that I pulled out of that book. And I never really thought about this, and thinking about it, I think it's probably true. It says, the end of America's absolute confidence of its moral exclusivity ended in Vietnam. I'll read that again, and I'm not going to, the end of America's absolute confidence of its moral exclusivity ended in Vietnam. And I think that's right. I think at that point we kind of thought we were the moral country, you know, everybody else. And I think that's a good point. Now, at one point, the son, again, was asking his father questions. And he says, well, what do you want to talk about? The rights and wrongs of war? I don't know much about that. I don't even know that much about war, except that I was in one, apparently. I thought that's another interesting point there. Now I got to get my act together here. See if I can figure this out. Jonathan kind of cleaned this up a little bit for me. As you can see, mine wasn't very good.
What's that?
Well, this is kind of where I think my story began. It's kind of silly when you look at a typewriter, but I think this a typewriter saved my life. When I was in high school, we didn't take languages until my 10th grade. So I took Latin in 10th grade, 11th grade, and I said, I'm not taking Latin for the third year. I mean, this is enough. I was going to take German, and I did. And I finally decided to take typing. So I took a course and learned how to type. Of course, now with keyboard, that's a pretty good deal. But when I got to Fort Devens in Massachusetts, you get into a replacement center, and you sit there and wait until they assign you to what you... Well, let's go back. You go to basic training, you got basic training, they give you a MOS, Military Occupational Specialty number. And mine was a Armor Intelligence Specialist. Ooh. Armor Intelligence Specialist, that sounds pretty good. Until I found out I was the guy that went out in front of the tanks to see where everybody else was. And I never figured out why a colorblind guy was out in front of the tanks seeing where people were. But then I got to Fort Devens, and you're in a replacement center, and you're sitting there doing nothing. I was completely bored. And they always say in the Army, you don't volunteer for anything. So they come in and ask you, can you drive a truck? And you end up pushing a wheelbarrow. So somebody comes in and asks a guy, can you type? And he was a little skeptical about that. And he said, no. I said, I can. I was bored to death, so I didn't care what I was doing. If I was pushing wheelbarrows, I really didn't care. They took me over, gave a typing test, and I got into a personnel unit. Going over to Vietnam, I found that my old MOS were the guys that were the tunnel rats. They were the guys that went in the tunnels to find out what was down there. And there were a series of tunnels that were obviously very major tunnels. I think they said there was one from Saigon to Cambodia. And they had their hospitals and everything underneath it. So I always say that saved my life. Sorry, I'm taking so long here. Our unit from Fort Devens, Massachusetts, was kind of a new thing, 196th Light Infantry Brigade, supposed to be able to go into a place real quickly, get out, and so forth. We were a new unit, about a year old, and on July 15th, 1966, they put us on a ship, sent us down the East Coast through the Panama Canal, up to Long Beach, California, and over. So I was on that ship for about, we were on a ship for about a month, which wasn't very pleasant for a lot of things, a lot of stories there. But most of us were so glad to be on the ship, even as bad as it was, because we weren't in country. And our tour was 12 months, so when we got there, we only had 11 months to go. So that kind of narrows that chance of being shot. People used to ask me, let's see what's next. People have asked me already, what did I think when I was told I was going to Vietnam? And I'm not sure I really thought about it that much. In my memory bank, I didn't think Vietnam was a big deal, and I didn't think it was going on, but now you find out Vietnam really started before 65 and 66. And I really didn't think it was that big a deal. But I did write a letter home telling a little bit what I thought about, and if I can find where I want to start. I'll read it. I personally am not very worried about the possibility of getting wounded or killed. The possibility is present, but even so, most of the soldiers return. Not many of the soldiers get killed by the actual result of combat. And being with the support battalion as I am, we should be at base and well protected. The possibility of combat wound is not my concern. And then we were told about how we had to prevent our disease. Diseases, I'll go a couple paragraphs about. If I take care of myself, I should be fine. It says, it still hasn't really sunk through my thick head, my thick skull, I do say, what is happening. Going to war always seemed like the next person's problem. For once, I'm that next person. I can't say that I'm bitter for being sent to Vietnam, and I can't say that I am overly overjoyed at the opportunity. The threat of physical danger is not too appealing, but then again, it is a service for our country, even though some people deem the whole affair unnecessary. I believe all of us at one time or other want to do something important, and this is about as important as can be. I still feel it is much better to fight the enemy here in Vietnam than to have the enemy fighting us in Southern Telford, Percy, Pennsylvania. I wouldn't be too keen on the idea of having a bunker in the backyard, and everyone would be physically involved instead of only a few. Maybe I should feel blue. I still can't believe I used that word. But I did see it in the headline in the newspaper today, the Inquirer, something about people being blue or something. So I guess it's all right. Maybe I should feel blue or down in the dumps, but I don't. I guess maybe I feel I had too much going for me. I've been taken care of for 21 years by others pretty well. And I guess I feel I can take care of myself for at least a year pretty well. Besides, I had more good training, other than the military, than many of these guys. We Hunsickers seem to usually handle our problems very well. And I'm sure one real hurdle will be overcome. So apparently I did have some thoughts about going to Vietnam. Being on the ship for a month, I guess you do think about a lot of things. I want to say one thing a little bit about leadership, and this goes for anywhere. I'm kind of running out of time already, but about leadership is, when we got over there, our first sergeant was so proud because we were the first ones to have a latrine. He had that latrine there about one day. Then we had another guy have us empty sandbags because somebody was driving through and it didn't look good, and then we had to fill them back up again.
Jeez.
Another guy came in and said we must have a chapel. He was shocked we didn't have a chapel. And this was somewhere in, right before November. And by Christmas, we had a chapel, which you will see later on. Another guy said we had to move our tents, and you'll see that too a little bit later on if I get through here. They were out of line a little bit, so we had to pick them all up, move them, and of course then the stuff in the middle holding them up fell, so we had to tear the floors up. And Westmoreland, I had an affinity for Westmoreland only for one reason, and now I find out he's pretty much a jerk. But he was there to speak to us, and our guys had us in the formation for an hour and a half in the heat, standing there waiting for him to come. And when he got there, he chewed out the commander and said, "Have these guys sit down." And he said, and then we heard later that this Westmoreland chewed out this commander for about 15 minutes for making us stand there. So there's good leadership and bad leadership. Of course, that's everywhere, even where we work.
Yeah.
That's when we got there, Vietnam flag. This was about a month and a half that we got there, so that's Snowy Ba Dinh. We were in a flat area, and that mountain was the overriding thing. We supposedly had the top and the bottom, and they supposedly had the middle. I don't know if that's true. That's just a little to see how when it gets wet. I mean, when it rains, how it gets wet, and it rains every day, or so it seems. Just want to look at this picture a little bit. This is where we had to clean our. Oops, I'm going to stop that back here. We'll stop here. Let me just go back. I didn't go back. We'll stop here. The picture was where we were cleaning our trays, and there's.
Just hit that back, hit that
I thought
one to the left. Yeah. There you go.
It's no big deal, except again, this is where we washed our trays. We had paper plates for a while, then some guy says we can't do those, and we had trays, and they had their own trays. So if you got sick, it was your fault, and blah 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 blah. But these are heaters in there. You had basically like our 3 sinks in the kitchen, 1, 2, 3. These are the KP guys washing the pots and pans and stuff, and this was later on because we never had water trucks early on. But the one thing I want you to remember about this later on, and we'll talk about later on, is the garbage can, which you really can't see there. This was our tent when we got there. I mean, that's after we got them off the ground. My first night, my cot was 1/3 in the tapioca patch and 2/3 in the rice paddy. Oops, we're going here too fast again. That's oops. Why is it not?
There you go.
I think I might need your help here.
Sure. All right. Continue to hit that back button. There we go. And then you keep back again.
It's one more. There. This was our first tent. Obviously the tents were on the ground at first, and when we got this was a luxury. Number one, you didn't get wet all the time. You even had a screen door. Let's stop right here. This is Three Musketeers. We had just gotten issued sunglasses, so it's about the only time I ever wore those sunglasses. But the point here is this bunker. It's about 1,800 sandbags in this bunker, and it's kind of divided into things. So the idea was when you got mortared, you ran out of your tent, jumped in here, because you had to carry your rifle and whatever else. And hopefully you're safe. One letter I didn't write home was when a guy got killed one night in the next tent. In this tent over here. A guy named Larry Holtz from Michigan. Another guy got hurt pretty badly, and one of the newcomers who was only in the country about 4 days got killed. Talking about foreigners, we had a guy in our unit who was from Colombia, Bogota, Colombia. He came up here to translate the '64 World's Fair in New York and got drafted. He was with us, and he got shrapnel on his backside at the same time. And he He never told his parents where he was. The other thing too, is the only time I think I really was really, well, scared is the word I'll use, I really was, is we had to take a convoy, their convoy was going out towards Cambodia, and guys from our unit had to ride shotgun, just in case something happened. Well, we go out through the small towns, which you're always afraid of the small towns, and you look on one side, there's a burned up car or a Jeep turned over, and you go on the other side, there's a burned up truck, and so forth. So we go out, we're coming back, and the truck stops, and the whole convoy goes past. Nobody stops. Everybody just keeps going by. And finally, the last truck stopped, and we were out of gas. And I don't remember if he siphoned gas in or if he had extra gas, but I said to the driver, I said, they told you before we left to fill your tank with gas. Oh, I thought I had enough. Well, that was probably about the only time. I mean, I was really scared. I didn't know if I was going to get back that day. This is kind of Main Street, and again, here we had ditches, so when it rained, the water would run off. And I talked about moving the tents. I don't know. Apparently, these tents were out of line. Let's keep going. Okay, stop there. Now, because of the guy getting killed, they changed the bunkers, so we took them from in the middle here, and we built them around our tents. Around our tents. So they're top. And later on, I'll show you. Theoretically, it's open in the bottom, so when that happens, you hit the floor and just go into the bunker. The only thing you have to be worried about what kind of animals or varmints might be in the bottom of the bunker. I don't think we ever had to do that. Let's keep going. That's the inside of the tent with about 14 people. You had your tent, your bunk, and about 2 feet on each side. Somebody had a guitar, as you can see. That's me. There were basically 3.5 themes to my letters. One was, of course, the heat and the rain. Always talked about the weather. Number 2 was always how tired I was. I was always tired. Sleep was irregular. We had a lot of duties, night stuff. And I think this is the next one. There I am, writing letters.
Oh, yeah.
I was always saying how far I'm behind writing letters. I think I stacked to my mother about 120 of them over a period of years. But if anybody wrote me a letter, I tried to respond. I didn't necessarily respond to Christmas cards and stuff. I always tried to respond to letters, especially if they wrote 2. I always wrote a letter home, and of course it was in the I forget what you call it, cabinet server right inside the door. I can just hear Mom saying, and soon when anybody walked in, "Did you read Lee's letter? We got a letter from Lee." And she probably said it about 5 times. People are probably tired of hearing. So I didn't write as many letters to my brothers and sisters because I got that general family letter. Oh, the other thing here is here's where you fell down and you went in here to get into that bunker. So you hit the floor. So if you didn't hurt yourself going into the floor, then you could just go. Okay, keep going. That's our first office, was in the tent. I worked in the... My job was part of the guys who assigned people. When they came to the country, we assigned them to the units where they had to go. Keep going. We got there in August, and by February, we had a new Quonset hut, cement floor, everything. That was in February. In April, they shipped us out. The 3 guys, it's my 3 buddies. If you saw one of us, you probably saw one of the other of us with us. We're working there. Keep going. We're going to have to keep going a bit faster here.
Okay, I'll let it go on.
Okay. It's me. It's just all around. Stop here. Stop here. 3 stories about the tree. Number one, when we first got there, we got an air base, and we said, where are we going? It was just an air base, and you looked down, there's nothing there. They said, see that tree up there? I said, no. "Oh, there's a tree up there. Yeah. That's where you go. So we walked about half a mile, or 3/4 of a mile, and that's where we were parked. And for about the first month and a half, 2 months, we walked that half a mile, 3/4 of a mile for everything. To eat, you had to carry everything up, but the roads weren't built, so they couldn't truck things up. And we built those tents of wood, we had to carry all that wood up. So we worked pretty hard at that. That's number one story. Leave there. Let's go back to the tree. Number 2 story, and I told you before at the garbage can. One of the first weeks I was there, I was in duty, KP, and we had to go outside the base to go to the dump to take the garbage. I'll never forget this. Is that there was a tree there, and under the tree was a Vietnamese older man. We took our garbage and dumped it, and he would point to somebody, one of his Vietnamese people. I can still see this with one guy. He came over with just a corner of a cardboard box, not a full box, just the corner of it. Went to that garbage and walked away. I hope he was taking that home for his animals and not to eat. I always thought he was taking it home to eat. I mean, it's our garbage, just. But again, there was a hierarchy. He's sitting under the tree. And the other thing about the tree, and I know we're out of time, but I just think this one is so important. As I said, our unit was to assign people. And so when they came to the replacement camp, they stayed there all week. That's the tree that the replacements would sit and stand under until they got their assignments. Can you imagine what that would feel like? Because a lot of these guys were infantrymen. And, this letter probably is too long, and I probably shouldn't read the whole thing, but if I condense it here. Anyway, I wasn't there, but 2 guys came home and said, there was a guy that just came in. His last name is Frederick, and he was born in Sellersville, and his mother was born there also, and his father in Telford. That's about all they could tell me, besides he graduated from Southern High School. I went back the next day and I got his records, pulled his records down. His first name was Glenn. It was Glenn Frederick. His home of record is Noble Street, Noble Street, South. And now I knew who he was. I glanced at his record to check things out. His MOS was 11C10, which was infantry. And of course, that's bad news. And his test scores weren't too good either. So, but when Larry and Bob saw he was from Souderton, they pulled his records. John, who did the assignment, he saw we had a need for a movie projectionist somewhere. I don't know why we needed a movie projectionist, but we did. We decided to talk to him, and he did get that movie projectionist job in another unit. I said I didn't want to go talk to him at first. I waited a while. I just wasn't sure if he'd know me, although I remembered him. He played football and graduated from 1965, I think. And I didn't know how to approach him, so I went over to him and said, well, when was the last time you were in Souderton? And that started, he looked up at me and said, Hunsicker? You're Hunsicker, I remember you. And the conversation went on, and we talked about who was in Vietnam, and this is the thing, there's nobody at home anymore. So anyway, John got him assigned there, and he eventually ended up using his infantry MS, but in an on-base campus, so he did mostly guard duty and stuff. The ironic thing about Glenn Frederick is he came home, was killed in a car accident. Now, it was probably about a year after that. Let's keep going. We had some entertainment, obviously. I'm sorry I'm taking so long. That was to bunker duty. That's how we got to the perimeter duty. We had to do all kinds of guard duty was perimeter. At one time, I thought this was pretty because the colors were great. Even for a colorblind guy, I thought the colors were great. These kids here, they came for Christmas one year. And here John's giving them candy. Just stop this right. No, stop right there. The only thing about this was really disappointing is there was about 200 or 300 of them. And I don't know a good word, but they stole us blind. They took salt and pepper shakers. Everything that wasn't fast they took. So it came from a good thing, and by the time you just keep going. You say, oh, why did we do this? Cute kids. Did have entertainment. By the way, anybody, that's Nancy Sinatra. Floyd Patterson. Martha Ray was there. She was probably one of our best in all kinds of groups. Stop it here. We had in-country, if we were lucky, you had an in-country R&R, rest and recuperation, rest and recovery, whatever. Mine was in Vung Tau. That's where we landed when we came in. This is the we're going to keep this going. I'll keep it going. This is the Vung Tau Center, and then we have some pictures of the city of Vung Tau. And while we're seeing the pictures of Vung Tau, I also had an outer country R&R, which was in Taipei, Taiwan. People could go to Hawaii, Japan. We usually let the guys who were married go to Hawaii because they could meet their parents. Japan, yeah, so Bangkok, Australia, and a few other places. I went to Taipei. I don't have any pictures of Taipei because they weren't so hot. The only story, I thought she was beautiful. I just thought she was. That's a mural on a wall. And the next are the towns. When we got to Taipei, you got there, you went to a hotel, and the guy comes and says, hey, we got some free drinks. Being naive, I said, yeah. Of course, what he was doing is he was trying to set you up with a female for the time you were there. And of course, his big selling point was that they're clean because they're inspected by the government every 6 months. These are what I call food trucks. This is, I don't know. I just wanted you to see some of the architecture. This was before Vung Tau was really destroyed. I don't know if it was destroyed, but it was before it was. Okay, stop there. We got sent from, as I said, we were in Tainan until we got there in Tainan, and they sent us away to Chulai, and that's actually where Rich was. I think a year later. I was in Chulai in '67. You were there in '68.
68, 69.
Same town. These are our new accommodations, which are so hot. Keep going. Different bunkers. Stop here. Well, this is where we shave. This is where we got our showers. Here's the water cans. You took them, put them up here and here, and then you took your shower. If you were lucky, the water got warm because it was hot up there. Always dirty. Always dirty. Never clean. This is John, and again, we can't quite see it. There you have. This is the care packages. I talked about care packages before a couple Sundays ago when I talked in church. That's his birthday cake. It's an angel food cake. His mother sent. Let's stop there. His mother sent over some canned icing, and he had a birthday celebration. The only reason they're stopping here is because there was a television. And a lot of times you got better reception on the television than we did on our radios. Keep going.
Chrissy, you wanted to say something?
Oh, stop. Well, they don't have to stop there. When we're ready to leave, a lot of guys were concerned about their sunburn, or suntans. This is the beach. This is the most beautiful beach I was ever on. Stop here. Most beautiful beach I was ever on. You go in the water up to your shoulders and look down and see the bottom. The water was so clear. It was absolutely beautiful. I don't know how often we got there. Here's the purpose of the picture. Our stacked rifles. A football game. Played a lot of wiffle ball, among other things. We had they went out on the beach and gave us I think it's one we were about ready to leave. Most of the unit left at the same time. Stop here. Most of the units left at the same time, so they gave us a party out on the beach, which was kind of cool. And it wasn't government money, I was told. Rainbows everywhere. You can be here in Souderton, you can be over there in Chuai, Vietnam. Good. Stop here.
Here's the chapel.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
That's all right, keep, that's all right.
Right there?
Yeah, keep those four.
Okay.
One more. This is our chapel that new cement commanding officer gave. I thought that place was absolutely beautiful. To me, that was beautiful. The first service we had in that chapel was on Christmas Eve. And this is what I wrote. A group of us from A Company, including quite a few Catholics, made our way to the new chapel. I spelled chapel wrong this whole time, I don't know. The chapel was just completed, and it was a beautiful thing. This was the first service in it. We arrived, took seats, and were handed song sheets. After a short prayer, Chaplain Raines started what was to be the one of the nicest hours I spent over here. We started with "O Come All Ye Faithful," and after that we went through them all, a lot of them anyway. The chapel steadily got more full with people, more enthusiastic and spirited. Everyone got into the swing, and I never heard Christmas carols sung with more gusto. Even the monotones bellowed out the tunes. We first sang all the old favorites, Silent Night, Joy to the World. We got into a few more lively ones as Deck the Halls and Good King Wenceslas. Chaplain Raines had a brief message which was excellent, and then back to the carols. We even tried "O Holy Night" as a group, and it wasn't too half bad. For 1 hour, Tain in Vietnam wasn't a wall. Christmas was here. We concluded with "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." Maybe the angels didn't sing December 24, 1966, but about 75 soldiers in Tain in Vietnam sang. Joy to the world. One other thing I wanted to mention here, the other thing too is we had Thanksgiving dinner was the first time I ever heard a prayer in Vietnam before a meal. I don't know what to say about religion and faith and so forth, what it really means, or how I felt about it over there, but it was a part of my life, and that was when I felt the most connected. I did go to church almost every Sunday. Some were for selfish reasons, one because it was about the only quiet time you ever had. You're by yourself, the only quiet time you ever had. And the other was about feeling connected. I always felt connected here to the church here. That would be a 12-hour time difference, but when I was there, I could just imagine being here. So that was very, very special. How my faith played out, I think, was because of the way I was raised. I don't think I ever really thought about it, except for raised. But there's one other thing that happened. The first chaplain killed over in Vietnam was a UCC pastor. His name was William Feaster. In March 1965, this young United Church of Christ minister, then assistant minister at Central Church on the Green in New Haven, Connecticut, was marching with the civil rights forces on the road from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. Deeply concerned for social action, especially in the struggle against racial discrimination, Bill Feaster was an articulate spokesman for fair employment and fair housing. 18 months later, Captain Feaster was marching again, this time with the men of the 196th Light Infantry Brigade in Vietnam. Seriously wounded by artillery fire, he insisted that other wounded men be cared for first and gave what comfort he could to those around him. His wife, an Army nurse stationed in Seoul, Korea, was flown to Saigon to care for her husband, and was with him when he died. He was also a shirt cockroach. I knew them from Massachusetts, from Fort Devens. I did sing in the choirs. On the boat, I sang in the choirs. The choir here sent me 2 reels. We used to have a special Christmas concert and Easter concert. We had special deals in the choir, pretty, not just anthems, but anyway. And they sent them over to me in reels. I had nothing to play them on. When I came back, of course, they were all fused together, and I never complained. I want to talk about letters a little bit. So those of you who heard me before talked about how I got this box of letters, how I saved it, was in the attic, and I didn't realize it was there until we moved. And is that the next one?
No, I'm just gonna let it.
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
Hmm.
Let's keep going. There. Now, these are the letters, some of the letters I sent home, but as you remember, I got 822 letters at that time. Many care packages, church bulletins, so forth and so on. Letters, again, were so important because they help you feel connected. You always felt connected, you didn't feel alone. I read another book, and this book was fascinating, or this book was really fascinating. I'm sorry it was so long, I'm almost finished. It was about a Vietnamese doctor, a 24-year-old female doctor who was born in Hanoi, went down south, was there. She took care of the people down there. She eventually got killed at the age of 27. She wrote her diary. She wrote diaries, and these are just fascinating diaries. One of the soldiers from this country was told to destroy all papers that were there, non-essential papers, and he was ready to throw this in the fire, and his interpreter said, "Don't throw this one in the fire, it's already hot." He took these diaries home against that regulations, saved them for 35 years, got them back to her mother in Vietnam 35 years later. She had it published over there. It became a bestseller over there. They sold about 420,000 copies of this book, when usually 5,000 copies of a book over there is. But the thing is that 75% of the people at that time were born after the Vietnam War. These people knew nothing about the war, and these kids just ate it up. Her book was called "Last Night I Dreamed of Peace: The Diary of Dan Wei Twan," translated by Andrew Kim. Talking about letters, she says, "Received 10 letters from the North at the same time. Each person has his own style, but they all care for me. It is as if each person has painted a portion of a larger picture, even." And that's what I said. All the letters I got, whenever they wrote about Easter, Christmas, or something, everybody had their slant. I've never heard the same thing twice. The big picture. I always said I knew more what was going on about my family when I was over there than I do now. So I was thinking that was all this. I have a couple quotes here which I won't read about her belligerence, about her devotion to her country. You know, really, in Vietnam, they just really wanted to connect the North and the South. It really was a civil war in France and what we got in the line. Their big thing was, we want to be together. We want to be together. But anyway, one time she writes, "If only I had wings to fly back to our beautiful house on Low Duck Street, to eat with Dad, Mom, and my siblings. One simple meal with watercress, and one night's sleep under the old cotton blanket. Last night I dreamed of peace." I came back and saw everybody. Oh, the dream of peace and independence has burned in the hearts of 30 million people for so long. For peace and independence, we have sacrificed everything. So many people have volunteered to sacrifice their whole lives for 2 words, independence and liberty. That could have been written by a Revolutionary War soldier. But I dreamed of peace. Well, as I said in the beginning, the big thing is I came home healthy. I have one more thing to read, and then we'll finish up. Let's go back. Back. In the paper this summer, there was a question raised, when were you worried about America? And a guy, a 77-year-old man by the name of Lloyd Williams says, "I'm kind of passive after serving in Vietnam and then being able to come home. I accept things as they are as they continue to change. Even during the war, I didn't worry because they kept us in the dark about what was going on. We would get letters from home and they would tell us about the war going on, the war we're fighting. When I got home from Vietnam, I couldn't get a job, which is a serious thing. I've got a couple other quotes here I could read you, which I won't. One guy says, "I won't hire you because you're from Vietnam." He says, I'm just a servant here, I'm not the person who did it. Anyway, he said, I couldn't get a job. I was going to school, but it was difficult. I went to Temple. We were going to school in groups because kids were throwing rocks at us, spitting on us. That was difficult, but I got through it. The VA benefits were hard to get, but at the point I had acquired some patience and realized life was never going to be the way I wanted it to be. It was America. But I'm glad to be here. I couldn't wait to get home. I did 3 tours in Vietnam, and I'm just glad to be alive. It's an ever-changing country. Yeah, I came home healthy. You saw the picture of the church. You saw the picture of the house. Keep going. Yoakum, of course, from the Yoakum family. And look at these dates. January 2, 1945, war ended in May. Paul Yoder, February. Paul is my cousin. So he was born, he died about 9 days after I was born. His father was the freight master down in Souderton here, back at that time where freight came in, he had to get rid of it. I just heard the story at our last family reunion this summer where my Uncle Paul Yoder called my Uncle Paul Hunsicker to come and help him carry his son's casket to the funeral. And I'm sure Uncle Paul carried those caskets also. Glenn was my contemporary. Glenn, I think graduated a year behind us in high school, I think. Of course, he was here at church, and he went through his Sunday school classes, youth group, the whole works, playing football in the park on Sunday afternoons. And Glenn was a contemporary. I really didn't know what happened to him. Of course, I was away, and Glenn got married and had a son before he was killed. And he was a helicopter pilot. And if you read any of these books, the helicopter pilots were the heroes of Vietnam. This is why we have so many injured, because they did not die in the battlefield. Because these guys would go in there and get these guys out. So I don't know what Glenn was doing. I don't know what his job was. He was a helicopter pilot. He was a hero.
This is a passage from Micah. But in the last days, Mount Zion will be the most renowned of all the mountains of the world. Praised by all nations, people from all over the world will make pilgrimages here. Come, they will say to one another, let us visit the mountain of the Lord and see the temple of the God of Israel. He will tell us what to do, and we will do it. For in those days the whole world will be ruled by the Lord from Jerusalem. He will issue his laws and announce his decrees from there. He will arbitrate among the nations and dictate to strong nations far away. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall no longer fight each other, but all war will end. There will be universal peace, and all the military academies and training camps will be closed down.
How long, O Lord, how long will it be until this entire earth is covered, is filled with plowshares, shovels, or hoes? How long will it be? You don't want to add another name to that list. Peace.
Amen.